A young black woman from the streets helps a wealthy businessman repair his motorcycle. But everything shifts when he notices the bracelet she wears, changing his life forever. The clatter of machinery and the incessant hum of fluorescent lights were swallowed up by the sharp, cutting voice of Victor Randolph, the CEO of the company. His cold, steely gaze never wavered from Marcus, a young black mechanic standing before a massive, malfunctioning industrial machine that had failed for the third time in the past week. The machine, crucial to the company's operations, had become a symbol of failure, and all eyes were on Marcus. Victor's posture was rigid, exuding arrogance. His arms were crossed, his jaw set in a look of superiority, as he eyed Marcus with a disdain that dripped from his every word. "Fix this mess," he ordered, his voice cold and cutting, echoing through the warehouse, demanding an answer. The silence of the room amplified the tension as the employees gathered around, watching, hoping, expecting Marcus to fail. The murmurs began almost immediately. "He's just a mechanic," someone whispered, loud enough for others to hear. "Let's see if he can even make a dent in that high-tech disaster." The laughter grew, a low, mocking sound that resonated through the cold, sterile air. They all stood there, a group of executives and workers who had already decided that Marcus was out of his depth, that his skills would never be enough to solve this problem. But Marcus stood still. His posture didn't change. His gaze remained fixed on the machine in front of him. The mocking whispers faded as he focused, blocking everything out. His breathing slowed, and his hands remained calm, as if he were already inside the machine, feeling its every gear and component. This wasn't new. He had spent his life being underestimated, dismissed by people who looked at him and saw only his skin, his background, his perceived limitations. But Marcus knew the drill. This was his moment to prove them all wrong. He didn't need to answer the mocking comments, to shout back or get defensive. Instead, he did what he had always done. He stayed calm, focused, and silent. With the same quiet determination that had gotten him this far in life, Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket, sending a simple, quiet text under the table. "Get ready. I'm doing this." The laughter from the crowd grew louder, more confident, but Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't react. His focus never wavered from the task at hand. He wasn't just here to fix a machine. He was here to prove something again, not just to them but to himself. For the next 3 weeks, the machine sat still, silent and broken, its gears beyond repair. The steady hum of the factory had turned into a quiet hum of frustration. Production had stalled, the company's losses mounting with every passing day. Yet the problem remained unsolved. Victor's patience thinned, but his attitude remained the same: arrogant, dismissive, mocking. The warehouse buzzed with the hum of idle machinery, but it was the workers who seemed more idle. The staff was growing restless, knowing their futures hung in the balance. And in the center of it all stood Marcus, who found himself treated like an outcast. Day after day, he stood in front of the machine, isolated by a wall of condescending remarks and passive-aggressive comments. He wasn't just facing a broken machine. He was facing the weight of others' doubts. Every day, Victor's taunts became more cutting. "Still haven't figured it out, have you?" he'd sneer, walking past Marcus with that same smug grin. "Maybe this isn't your thing. Maybe you should stick to cleaning the floors." His words stung, but Marcus said nothing. He had learned long ago that responding to cruelty only invited more. Instead, he focused on the machine, the problem, not the distractions. His father's voice echoed in his mind, a voice that had been a guiding force in his life. "Patience and precision, Marcus. Everything else comes after." His father had been a mechanic for as long as Marcus could remember. Not a man of degrees, but of hands-on expertise. No formal education, but years of experience that spoke louder than any textbook. Marcus knew the problem wasn't beyond him. It was just about finding the right solution, the way his father had taught him. But the people around him, the executives, were indifferent. Some whispered among themselves, others openly laughed. Marcus could hear them, but their words didn't matter. What stung more than their mockery was the silence of the others. the ones who knew exactly what was happening but chose to stay quiet. Samantha, a quiet warehouse worker who had given him the occasional kind word, spoke up once. "Someone should stop this," she whispered, her words barely cutting through the noise. But her voice was drowned out, just like the others who should have spoken but didn't. None of them said a word. No one was brave enough to stand up for him. But Marcus didn't care. He had come to terms with this long ago. He knew the stakes, he had always known. If he failed here, if he didn't get the machine working, his career would be over. His chance to prove that he was more than the color of his skin, more than the label they'd given him, would slip away forever. But Marcus wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. He wasn't done fighting. Marcus stood before the machine, his hands steady on the cool, metallic surface. The noise of the warehouse, the hum of idle machines, the murmurs of his colleagues, faded into the background. The voices behind him continued to mock, but he didn't hear them anymore. Years of experience had taught him to block out the distractions, to tune out the world that tried to diminish him. In this moment, it was just him and the machine. In his mind, Marcus saw the inner workings of the machine clearly, each part like a puzzle piece, each gear interlocking with another in perfect harmony. The confusion and noise surrounding him didn't matter. He knew what needed to be done. His father's lessons, learned long ago in their small workshop, flooded back to him, comforting and guiding him. The most powerful tool, Marcus, is not the wrench or the screwdriver. It's your ability to stay calm when everything around you is falling apart. The mocking laughter grew louder, but Marcus remained unmoved. He couldn't hear the derisive chuckles or the whispered insults. They were nothing but white noise. His eyes never left the machine as his hands moved with precise determination. Every turn of the wrench, every twist of the screw, was a small step toward solving the problem, but also toward proving something deeper, something more personal. Victor's voice pierced through his concentration once again. "What's the matter, boy? You sure this is your level?" The words were sharp, designed to cut him, to make him react. Victor's laughter followed, louder this time, almost a victory in itself. The tension in the air was palpable, but Marcus didn't flinch. He had seen this before, he had fought these battles before. His expression remained neutral, his gaze unwavering. His thoughts were clear. His calm was a shield, a choice to not let the chaos around him dictate his actions. Inside, he was like a storm, violent and unrelenting, but outwardly he was still collected, like the center of a hurricane. Everything around him could spiral, but he would remain untouched. His father's voice echoed again. "Patience, son. Patience and precision. That's how we win." Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Marcus raised his eyes slowly, locking onto Victor's mocking gaze. With a calm smile, he spoke, his voice steady and unwavering. "I'm ready. I just need a flashlight and a wrench." The room fell silent for a brief moment. It wasn't the words that stunned them. It was the quiet certainty in his voice, the calm that radiated from him as if nothing could shake him. Marcus grasped the wrench, the cold metal familiar in his hand, its weight comforting, like an old friend. The crowd watched him, their skepticism palpable in the air. Each sneer and judgment felt like an added weight on his shoulders, but he ignored it. The task before him was monumental. The machinery was complex, its failure intricate and daunting. But Marcus wasn't intimidated. He had faced much bigger challenges in his life, both personally and professionally. Every twist of the wrench was deliberate. He wasn't in a rush. His movements were controlled, measured, each adjustment of the engine a step closer to solving the problem. He knew this machine not because it was his job to, but because he was the one who understood its language. His hands moved with quiet precision, as if he were solving a puzzle that no one else could see. The machine hummed faintly at first, a soft vibration that resonated beneath his fingers. The sound barely registered at first, but Marcus felt it. It was a beginning, a sign that he was on the right track. The skeptics in the crowd continued to mutter, their disbelief growing louder. Their whispers were thick with doubt. "It's just a fluke," one of them said. "He'll never fix it. It's too far gone." But Marcus didn't look up. He didn't need their approval, their applause. His mind was clear, his focus sharper than ever. His only goal was to fix the machine, to do what no one else had been able to do. As he adjusted the engine once again, the hum deepened, resonating through the steel. The gears, which had been motionless for so long, began to shift. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the engine came alive. Victor, standing on the periphery of the group, watched with growing disbelief. His arrogance, which had once been a source of strength for him, now began to falter. "It's just a fluke," he muttered, his voice tinged with frustration. "This won't last." But Marcus remained steady. His hands never hesitated, never rushed. His calm confidence grew layer by layer. He was doing it. The engine that had been dead for weeks was finally awakening. Its low purr now noticeable, almost like a soft whisper that turned into a steady hum. The room grew quiet as the noise from the machine deepened. There was no more laughter, no more mocking. The crowd, once skeptical, now stood in hushed silence, watching as Marcus continued to work. His knowledge, skill, and unshakable patience were winning the day. The engine roared to life with a renewed strength, and Marcus, unfazed, continued his work, proving them all wrong. It wasn't a fluke. It was mastery. It was the result of quiet, unrelenting effort. And the shift had begun. Marcus's hands moved with a quiet brilliance. The machine before him, though a complicated mess of metal and wires, had become a puzzle to him, each piece fitting perfectly into the next. His movements were fluid, deliberate, and full of purpose. This wasn't just about fixing a broken machine. This was about dissecting its heart, understanding its every component, and rebuilding it from the ground up, piece by piece, gear by gear. His diagnosis was simple but brilliant. The torque system was slightly miscalibrated, and the pressure valves were off. A small adjustment was all it would take to bring the entire system back to life. It wasn't the kind of thing anyone could see at first glance, but Marcus had spent years learning the language of machines. As his hands worked, the machine began to hum more clearly, its mechanical heart pulsing back to life. With every turn of the wrench, each carefully placed adjustment, the machine responded, subtly at first, then with more certainty. The noise in the room shifted. The skeptical whispers grew quieter, and the laughter that had once filled the air was now replaced with stunned silence. The crowd, who had once doubted him, now stood motionless, captivated by what they were witnessing. The soft hum of the machine grew steadier, clearer, each movement of Marcus's hands more precise than the last. They could see it now. This wasn't just some mechanic working. This was someone who knew the machine's soul. Someone who understood its every need. Victor's voice, once filled with arrogance, now trembled with disbelief. He took a step forward, still trying to cling to his narrative. "It's a fluke. It's just." Marcus interrupted him with quiet confidence. "Not a fluke," he said, his voice calm and steady. "It's just engineering." His words were simple, humble even, but they carried the weight of a truth that Victor could not deny. The calm certainty with which Marcus spoke, combined with his methodical, flawless work, revealed a level of mastery that no one had expected. He wasn't just fixing a machine, he was performing a delicate operation. The machine, now humming smoothly and rhythmically, was alive again. Marcus stepped back from the machine, wiping his hands on his coveralls, but the shift had already happened. The crowd, which had once doubted him, now stood in stunned silence, unsure of what to say. Marcus had proven them wrong. He had proven he wasn't just a mechanic, he was a master. And now there was no turning back. The room fell into absolute silence as the machine hummed to life. The once constant mocking laughter, the taunts and jeers, all ceased in an instant. The only sound was the steady purr of the engine, proof that Marcus had succeeded. As the noise from the machine filled the space, the tension in the room was palpable. Victor, standing just a few feet away, stared in stunned disbelief. His eyes flicked between the machine and Marcus, his expression twisted in frustration. His pride was wounded, his authority shaken. He couldn't deny the truth, no matter how hard he tried. Marcus had done it. "No way," Victor muttered, his voice tinged with frustration as he tried to salvage some sense of control. "This doesn't mean anything." Marcus didn't flinch. He had already proven his point. His gaze was steady, unwavering as he looked at Victor. "The pressure valves were miscalibrated," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the tension that hung in the air. "It's a simple fix, really." The words were precise, logical, and unassailable. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't luck. It was knowledge and expertise. As Marcus spoke, the mood in the room shifted. The crowd, once skeptical and mocking, had grown quiet. A few people had stepped closer, their faces no longer filled with doubt but curiosity. Some nodded in silent agreement, their earlier contempt replaced with a tentative recognition. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Victor, his face flushed with anger, stepped forward, trying to regain his dominance. "You're just lucky," he spat, his words sharp with frustration. "This doesn't mean anything. You don't belong here." Marcus remained unmoved. He wasn't here to justify himself to Victor or anyone else. "I'm not here to prove anything to you," he said, his tone calm and firm. "I'm here to fix what's broken." His words rang through the air, each one cutting through the tension in the room like a knife. Victor, desperate to maintain his facade, opened his mouth but no words came out. He was speechless. The crowd, once looking to him for validation, now turned their attention to Marcus. The shift was undeniable. They saw him for what he truly was, not just a mechanic, but the one who had fixed what they all believed was unfixable. Victor's power had faltered, and in that moment, Marcus had claimed his victory. Just as Victor stood there, stunned and speechless, the door to the warehouse creaked open. A man walked in, a figure who, at first glance, seemed unassuming. He was older, his gray hair a testament to years of experience, and his clothes were worn, not flashy. Yet, the moment he stepped into the room, the air seemed to shift. His presence commanded attention. Something about him made the tension in the room tighten. James Blackwood, Marcus's estranged father, had entered. The crowd grew still, a hushed silence falling over them. They could sense something different in the older man's demeanor, an unspoken confidence, an undeniable gravitas that made Marcus's earlier success seem even more profound. James wasn't just any man. His very presence seemed to magnify the weight of Marcus's accomplishment. Marcus stood tall beside him, his voice calm but carrying the weight of the moment. "This is James Blackwood, my father," he said, his words resonating through the room like a quiet storm. The revelation hit the crowd like a thunderclap. Victor's face fell as the truth sank in. The man he had so ruthlessly belittled, the mechanic he had dismissed, was the son of a legend. Marcus wasn't just any mechanic. He was the son of a renowned engineer. Victor's arrogant smirk evaporated, replaced by a look of pure disbelief. He had spent the last few weeks mocking Marcus, questioning his abilities, underestimating him at every turn. But now the truth was undeniable. Marcus's skills were not just the result of luck, but the culmination of generations of genius. James Blackwood had been a genius in his own right, someone who had quietly shaped the very machinery that the company relied on, but had chosen to live outside the limelight. He had never sought recognition or praise. Instead, he had devoted his life to his craft. He had lived off the grid, away from the public eye, deliberately keeping himself hidden. But now the truth was out, and the legacy of his brilliance was front and center. Victor's arrogance crumbled before the weight of this new knowledge. He hadn't just underestimated Marcus. He had belittled the legacy of an engineer who had shaped the world they all worked in. James didn't say a word. He simply gave a silent nod to Marcus, a gesture filled with meaning. It was a bond that needed no words. The crowd watched in awe, seeing the unspoken connection between father and son, two men who shared not only blood but a deep understanding of the world they lived in. And in that moment it was clear to everyone. Marcus was no ordinary mechanic. He was the heir to a legacy of brilliance, With the truth laid bare and the identity of Marcus's father revealed, Marcus took one final step. The truth about Victor would now be exposed for all to see. He stepped forward, his movements deliberate, and with a quiet but forceful command, he motioned toward the screen. "Here it is," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the thick silence that had settled over the room. "This is who Victor Randolph really is." The video began to play. The footage, secretly recorded during their earlier interactions, was undeniable. On screen, Victor's voice rang out, sharp and cruel, mocking Marcus as he worked. "You're not even qualified to touch this." Victor's sneering voice echoed through the room, followed by more ridicule. Taunts that cut at Marcus's very soul. "What's a mechanic like you doing here? Go back to the shop and clean the floors. You don't belong in this room." The room gasped collectively, the weight of Victor's words sinking in like a lead weight. The cold, harsh truth was inescapable. Marcus didn't flinch as he looked around the room, each person taking in the undeniable proof of Victor's cruelty. The video played, showing Victor in all his arrogance, a man who had so freely mocked another's worth. Marcus stepped back, letting the room absorb the footage. Then, with a steady hand, he placed another stack of documents on the table in front of him. These weren't just words or accusations. They were legal documents, detailing Victor's illegal activities and racial discrimination. The crowd was in shock as the details unfolded. Contracts violated, shady deals made, discrimination embedded into the company's very fabric. The walls of power Victor had so carefully built around himself began to crack, then crumble, bit by bit, as the truth spilled out into the open. Victor, once untouchable, now stood exposed. His face turned a deep shade of red as he fumbled with his phone, desperately dialing numbers, but the calls went unanswered. The facade of control he had so carefully maintained began to collapse in front of him. His empire was falling apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The crowd, which had once silently supported him or remained passive, now turned their gaze toward him, their expressions hardening. There was no more room for denial, no more place for his arrogance. Victor was nothing more than a man now, crumbling under the weight of his own lies. And Marcus, though silent, had already won. 48 hours later, Marcus sat in a sleek new office, the hum of the city outside almost drowned by the quiet satisfaction that filled the room. The walls, freshly adorned with the company's insignia, felt like a world away from the cramped corner of the warehouse he had once worked in. The promotion to lead engineer had come swiftly, almost unexpectedly. Yet, Marcus wasn't focused on the title or the new corner office. His victory wasn't about wealth or status. It was about something far deeper. It was about the redemption of his own soul. Victor had been fired, his career shattered under the weight of his actions. He had been publicly shamed and was now under investigation for his illegal activities and racial discrimination. But Marcus didn't feel any joy at Victor's fall. It wasn't about revenge. For Marcus, the true victory had always been about proving to himself that he could rise above the injustice. He had faced the worst of the world and stood firm, and that was the victory that mattered most. The door opened, interrupting his quiet reflection, and in walked an unexpected figure, an executive from a foundation that had been following his story. The man smiled and handed Marcus a letter. The words on the page were surreal. A scholarship for advanced engineering studies. A scholarship that would allow Marcus to continue his education, to build on the genius that had been hidden for so long. The foundation had recognized his potential and wanted to invest in his future. Marcus's mind raced for a moment as the weight of it all hit him. The future was now wide open. There were no more limits, no more doubt. He could continue his work, continue learning, and, most importantly, continue proving that anyone could overcome the odds, no matter who they were or where they came from. He leaned back in his chair, letting the rush of emotions pass. The journey had been long, but the struggle had shaped him into someone far stronger than he had been when it began. It had never been about fixing the machine. It had always been about proving to himself that no matter how much the world tried to tear him down, he could stand tall. He looked out the window, his gaze steady. The city bustled below him, but Marcus knew that this was only the beginning. His story wasn't just about one man fixing a machine. It was about something much greater, a victory that rippled out, breaking barriers and forging new paths. In the end, Marcus didn't just fix a machine. He fixed a broken system, one silent, determined step at a time.